G'day everyone, it's Karl Thomson here from StorageCraft Asia Pacific, and today I'm going to be doing a webinar on the IT Edition and IT Edition Pro. So it's going to be a technical overview today. Just firstly, for those of you who don't know, this is the IT Edition. It's a USB key, and the idea is as long as you've got this USB key on you, you can plug this into a computer without installing anything and do a backup or restore. So it's a zero footprint tool. You don't need to install anything, and you can also plug it into a live running Windows machine, or you can boot off the USB key and do it that way as well. So you don't even need to be able to log into the machine to back it up. So the first thing I'll just quickly go through is some product scenarios here just on our marketing PDF. It just talks about the different options of where you might use this. So restore backup images to or from physical and virtual machines, migrate backup images to new systems, physical or virtual, with StorageCraft hardware independent restore. So you can go from one machine to completely different hardware and it's going to be fine. You can move everything from one disk to another. You can back up systems without installing any software, as I mentioned. You can recover individual files and folders in moments. You can use it unlimited time. So the idea here is, especially if you're familiar with ShadowProtect, the difference with the IT Edition is it's an unlimited thing. It's not locked down to one computer or licensing to one machine. So you can quickly virtualize existing virtual machines, migration across varied environments. So yeah, as I mentioned, from one hardware to another. We've got the clone, so you get an exact copy of the disk. So if you're about to install some software on some new customer server, for example, you can do a quick backup without installing anything and know that if something goes wrong, you can quickly restore or virtual boot to recover that machine. As I mentioned, rolling back and get reliable backups. If you know that you're starting to get bad sectors or your RAID controller is dying, shut the machine down, boot off this USB key so that it's not actually reliant on that Windows operating system anymore, and do your backup. So lots of good use cases here. So without spending too much time on that, let's just jump straight into it. First thing I'm going to do is just opening up my Windows Explorer, and I'm going to plug in my StorageCraft IT Edition key. Here it's just popped up a Z drive. Now the second thing I'm going to do is, this is my demo computer. I've got quite a lot of data on here. I'm actually going to plug in another hard drive, which is actually, this one's from a 2003 server. It's a physical server. I'll put in a little USB adapter onto the hard drive, and I'm just going to plug it in, and I'll just show you why I'm using this one in a second. Here we go. Cool, we're up and running. So what you can see here is I've got an F drive and a G drive that's just appeared. So this F drive's got the operating system, and this G drive's got the data that's on this disk that I've just plugged in. So let's go into this IT Edition key, and we'll scroll down and run the Start ShadowProtect CMD. This is just a shortcut to launch the ShadowProtect pre-installation environment. So here's the ShadowProtect console. Now again, if you're familiar with ShadowProtect, it's pretty much the same, although there are a couple of differences you'll notice as I go through. First thing you might notice here is this granular recovery for Exchange. Now this is available on the IT Edition Pro only, and this again is an unlimited function where you can granularly restore emails or do migrations of Exchange databases from one server to another, or export out to PST. Now I won't go into too much of this for this demonstration, just simply because we do have a separate GRE webinar if you are interested in that. The key thing here is you don't need to install anything, and the product is unlimited license, as is the rest of the IT Edition in terms of ShadowProtect. So if we just pop over here at the disk map and take a quick look, here's this disk I've connected. It's a 500 gig disk. We've got a 224 gig system drive, which was my C drive, and there's a data volume there. So we're just going to quickly go through the backup wizard and do a backup of this. What we can see, just while that was happening, it was looking for the license, so it is validating that my IT Edition is licensing is up to date. And now we can just scroll through here, and here's this disk I was talking about. I'm just going to back up this. This was the C drive again. It is F drive here. I'm just going to back up that one partition for this scenario, just to do a nice quick backup, and I can show you actually recovering that into a virtual machine and how we do that. Now I'm just going to back up to this iDrive Backup Server 01 folder I've got here. compression method, standard, high or none. So default is standard. If you're using high, it's going to use up a bit more CPU, but you will get some space savings. You can encrypt it by putting in a password. That is recommended if you're going to be storing it or moving it around off-site, etc. If you're backing up to something that doesn't support files larger than 4 gig in size, and it is quite common in those Linux-based NASs, you can split up that image file. If we look in advanced here, you'll notice this window is quite different to the normal ShadowProtect one. It is a bit more cut down. The big one I wanted to talk about is the include free space. Now this is a key when you're talking about data forensics. So basically when you delete a file from your computer, it doesn't actually delete it from the disk. The file's still there, it's just removed from the file allocation. So by including free space allows that backup to be used by forensics to go and fully recover data, or particularly if there was some corruption and that kind of thing. And I will talk about corruption when I do the restore, because including free space, when you do a checkdisk/R for recovery, will actually scan that free space to try and repair any problems in the disk if it can. So it is a good idea if you're aware of problems or if you're doing forensics. It's absolutely necessary. So I'm not going to do it in this instance because, again, obviously it is going to use up a lot more space to do that backup. It's going to be a very intensive backup. And, of course, we can throttle it down. So if you're backing up a live server in the middle of the day, you might want to throttle this down a little bit if you don't want to, if you're concerned about the performance for your users. So I'm just going to accept the defaults here. We're going to go next and execute now and finish. So this is just showing you I haven't installed anything. I've literally just plugged in the USB key and I'm doing a backup. Now again, I could be backing up my current live C drive as we speak, but I'm just choosing to do a smaller partition here. Just you'll notice how fast this is going through this. It's just going to simplify the demo for me. And yeah, as I mentioned, the free space is the key for the forensics. And what I'll do next is show you our recovery options with this IT Edition. So I've got that backup there. If we go and take a look in that iDrive backup server 01 folder, there's our F-volume ShadowProtect full backup. That's what that SPS stands for. It's 1.3 gig. I think the volume was initially about 3.5 gig. So we've got quite a good compression ratio there. It's just really a base install of the C drive. So from the IT Edition, if I go back to Wizards, obviously we can now restore that image directly back to another hard drive if we wanted. I don't need to boot it into anything if I don't want to. I can browse that file. So if I go browse, next, and basically browse to that, that SPF image, again, without installing anything, I can now restore individual file or folders straight out of here. It's going to assign it to H drive. I'm just going to mount it as read-only because I don't need to change anything. So this will allow me to show you how easy it is. I've got that backup. I'm now in H drive here that it's just mounted, and I can restore files or folders straight out of here, just by simply opening up a file copy or whatever, drag and drop. It's very easy. And again, you can just go back through the ShadowProtect console to do the dismount of the image. Again, without installing anything, this is just very straightforward. You can plug this IT Edition key in anywhere and do this kind of stuff. So the next thing I want to do is talk about restoring this to another machine. So of course the options are, if you're going to restore to another hardware or to a new hard drive, you can just obviously plug the hard drive in and restore it, or you can boot off the IT Edition USB key and do a restore, which I'm going to show you next. The only difference with this scenario is I'm going to do it through a virtual machine. And this just allows me to show you a couple of things, and it obviously makes it a bit easier for this webinar. The machine I'm going to use is this one here called Server 01 Restore. And if I take a quick look, the first thing is I've got a 200 gig hard drive assigned to this. It's been initialized. There's no data on it. And I've also attached the IT Edition ISO file. So I don't need to use the USB key at this point. I can use the RE builder, the recovery environment builder, which I will show you at the end, to create an ISO file, and I can go and boot up, multiple virtual machines at once off this recovery environment. So let's take a look at that now. You can double click on here. As I mentioned, the hard drive was initialized, so it's actually just gone straight ahead here and booted straight off that ISO file. You'll see when I do the restore and reboot next time, it will detect an operating system and then do the usual do you want to boot off the CD type question, which I won't do, so we can actually see the whole process. So I'm just going to go ahead here and accept the license agreement. I'm also going to say yes to do the network support. What I'm going to do is just increase this window here to make it a bit easier to view. So I'll go yes. It's going through here. Now I'm just selecting the time zone here. Now the next thing is, this is a brand new disk. It's not even initialized, so it has popped up for me. It's noticed that straight off the bat. So I'm going to click in here and go initialize as an MDR disk. That's what I'm using for this restore. And the signature, that's fine. So I've just initialized that disk, and I can see down here under info that I've got a valid IP address in the network that I've set up here. So I know I'm online and I'm good to go. I could, of course, go to Tools and load drivers if I want to load a RAID controller driver or a network driver if I know I've got some driver that's not supported by Windows 8. We take a look here at the disk map. You can see here my unallocated 200 gigabyte disk, and my ISO file's got a couple of drives here as well. So if I go create primary partition, there's the 200 gig there. So I would need to map a network drive. So I'm going to go down to my network configuration here and go to network drives. And what I can do now is just map a network drive to my my backups folder, 10.0.2.1/backups, and I'll put in my username and password and go connect. So I've successfully mapped to Z drive. Cool, straightforward, and go OK. Now, there's something I need to do here, but I'm just going to ignore it for a second and just show you the problem I'm going to run into. So I'm going to do the restore wizard. I'm going to go next. I'm going to select the restore option, and I'm going to browse to the Z drive. And there's my Server 01 folder, and there's my ShadowProtect full backup image. You can see here it was a 224 gig volume, and there's my D drive it's showing me, which I didn't back up, so that's okay at this point in time. Select next. There's my unrecognized file system with my 200 gig partition. I'm going to select that. Now it's popped up saying the selected free space is not large enough for the backup image. So basically we backed up a volume that is bigger than what I'm trying to restore it to. So I can't actually proceed at this stage. I need to select a bigger disk. However, there was only about 3.5 gig of data on that volume. I know it should be able to fit, so let me show you what you can do. We go across here to Explore Backup Image. Now again, this is pretty much what I did earlier from within Windows, is just we're going to mount it to a drive letter. So this is going to mount it as E drive, but what I'm going to do is untick Mount Backup as read-only. I want to make it a writable image. Next, finish, and just accept the drivers, and that's done. So very straightforward. Now, simply all I'm going to do is straight away dismount it again, except this time, because I mounted it as writable, I'm going to get an option here to shrink the volume. So firstly, it's going to save the changes to an incremental file, so we're never going to touch that base image that we know is good. It's going to create an incremental file, and it's going to shrink it. Now, this will literally take 1 second. It's already done. I had shrunk that volume. Now, if I just quickly go back, and let's take a look at what's just happened here so I can explain it. So here's my incremental file that now links back to the ShadowProtect full backup. If I click open, what you'll see here is the backup was of that 224 gig file system, but the actual volume size has been shrunk into 125 gig. Now, I did mention that there was only 3.5 gig of used data. So it's not shrinking it right down to that available used data, but it is shrinking it to as much as it can. And obviously it comes down to the fragmentation on the disk and other bits and pieces. I can now restore this to, I could restore it to 126 gig volume. It's shrunk right down to that amount of space. So that's fine. I'm just going to cancel out of that now. And let's go straight into the restore wizard again. So I'm going to go through it. Next, select restore, browse, select that incremental file now that I've created. So again, the 224 gig, but the volume size is only 125 gig. You can go next. It's just giving me a summary and showing me that backup chain there. It's going through the incremental back to the full. Go next again, and now I should be able to select this C drive here without a problem. So I don't have an error this time. That 125 gig will happily restore back down to a 200 gig volume. So there's never any problem restoring to a larger volume. So go next, finalize the volume at the end of this restore. Yes, that's good. And now we've got our restoration option. So set partition is active. This is important. This is the C drive. It has to be active to boot. Restore the MBR, the master boot record. Now this is important you understand this one. Restore the MBR from the image file. So from that backup I did, I want to restore that same MBR. There is only ever one scenario where you should ever use that, and that is if I was restoring back to exactly the same hard drive. And I'm not talking about another hard drive, the same model number, the same size. I'm talking about the exact same hard drive. Now if that disk was stuffed or whatever, or it had problems, you're not going to be doing that. So you're always going to be restoring the original Windows MBR. This will get the original Windows master boot record and restore it back into this image, and that will sort out any problems that you have. So always do this option if you're restoring to another disk. Now I'm restoring to a virtual machine here with a VHD or whatever it is, so I'm restoring the original Windows MBR. The next option is restore disk signature. Now this contains stuff like the root certificate authority uses this. You know, your master domain controller, if it's the root CA, your SBS server, for example, you need to include this. It also tells Windows that it's the same disk as it was before, so it avoids sort of Windows thinking, oh, something's changed. So it's good generally to do this, particularly for your C drive. And the next thing, which is on by default, restore the disk hidden track. Now this contains stuff like program serial numbers, partition information, particularly for the C drive. Now the final option is the hardware independent restore, if restoring to a different computer. Well, I am. I've gone from a physical box to a virtual machine. So what this will do is sort out the drivers so that I don't have a problem when it first boots up. It's not going to go, oh God, I don't know what that storage controller is, I'm going to blue the screen. What it will do is it is the Windows 8 pre-installation environment. So you've got to remember it is using what Windows 8 has available out of the box. If you do have some sort of funky RAID controller, it will tell you that it has done its best effort to fix that, but you may need to supply your own driver, and that driver will obviously be a 64-bit one to match, if it is, or 32-bit to match your environment that you're restoring. By looking at the advanced tab here, this allows you to actually add in files and directories before it even gets underway to, you know, if you know that it's going to be an issue. And again, I'll show you how to incorporate that in the ISO file using the RE Builder as well. So I'm going to go next and finish to confirm, and it's going to fly through here again. As I mentioned, I did back up a small volume, so this is going to happen pretty quickly. If I just click on Show Details, we can just, you know, see a bunch of information here about, you know, opened the file, it's looked at the compression method, it's gone through here and looked at the GUID of the file, mount point, original disk, so it's looking at the sectors and the partition information, it's looked at the operating system that the image was created on, and the mount point, which was the F drive, which it's going to mount as. And the next step it's going to go through is that this point it's just really restoring the data. The next thing we can see here is that set the partition to active. I'm just going to move this out of the way for a second. It restored the MBR boot code, the master boot record. It set the signature of the disk and the first track of the disk. So it's gone through and done all of those options, saying the boot INI is valid, so it doesn't need to repair that. And now it's starting the hardware independent restore configuration, the HIR. Now, because I've used the IT Edition, what's prompted up is it needs to authenticate back to that USB key. It is the nature of the IT Edition that you have to have that USB key, so it prevents, you know, people using this for the wrong reasons. If you have a normal recovery environment, you don't get this, you have to authenticate your hardware independent restore back online to say you've got a valid ShadowProtect serial number. So let me show you how this works. It's very easy, and again, it just works over networking. So I'm going back to my host here. I'm out of the virtual machine. I could be on another machine. It doesn't matter. I'll plug the USB key in somewhere on that network and literally just run the license server. So I'll just close this window, and this is just, again, it's just a shortcut to run the license server. It's bound itself to every available network adapter on this machine. It's using port 20248. And connections established, so nothing's connected to it at the moment. You may need to create a firewall exception for that port number. So two things you need to be aware of here that are really cool. The first thing is this can handle up to 10 connections at once. So although ShadowProtect and I guess StorageCraft overall, we don't target ourselves as a deployment software vendor. We're really about, restoration and backups of your servers and workstations, etc. But this does allow you to restore up to 10 at once by simply running the license server at one place, and you can boot up off the ISO or burn to a CD and up to 10 servers at once or workstations and connect to this license server for the hardware independent restore. Now the other thing it can do is it can connect across up to 5 subnets as its limit. So if you've got a large organization that's got a couple of subnets with routing, or you're coming over a VPN, as long as it's under 5 hops, it will accept that connection in the license server. So this does make it, you are able to use it across a larger site, and you don't have to have that USB key at the same location. So if I jump back to this virtual machine that we've got running and put in my IP address of where the license server is running, 10.0.2.1, and there's that port 202.48, and click OK, it's now accepted that. So if I take a quick look at that license server, we can see here connections established as 1. That's cool. And go back here, we can see it's now scanning the current hardware of this virtual machine and telling the operating system and the files that we just restored what drivers Windows is going to need to boot. Now, the main thing is obviously the storage controller. Windows is going to need that to boot up. If you don't sort out stuff like network drivers and all that kind of stuff now, it's not a big problem. You can go into Device Manager once Windows is booted up and sort it out then. It's no big deal. Just, there's a few core things it's got to sort out with Windows so that it doesn't blue screen when you first boot it up. Now, so that's all restored and we're all happy there. I'm going to go back to this map and we can see here. So there's that C drive with the data restored. So I know it's C drive, and I'm going to go to the command shell and I'm going to run my checklist. So chkdsk space C drive /R for recover. So this is going through now, particularly as I mentioned, if you include a free space and repairing the file system. So it's really good to do it. You should always try and do this before you boot into Windows to prevent any issues. And even on this one here, I can see it's replaced bad clusters in certain files here. So again, I obviously need to do this. So it's always recommended to do this. If you're really running out of time, you could try your chances of booting up and doing the checklist later. But really, if you've got the time, it's the best time to do it now before you physically boot off that new hard drive. Now, again, I'm just going to cancel this. It's just for the demo. I'm going to X out of the recovery environment, and it's just going to automatically reboot, nice and easy. Asking me, as I mentioned, do you want to boot from that CD? So I'm not going to push anything, and now it's just going to straight away boot into that Windows server. So as you can see, we're right into the Windows starting up. I haven't had any issues given it was come from a physical disk across into and restored into a virtual machine. And that's the real cool thing with ShadowProtect, and how easy was that with the IT Edition. So I can just go in here and log straight in. I'm happy as Larry. Now the one key thing is, particularly with your servers, is this new environment has obviously got a new network adapter. So it's going to be set to DHCP. It's the default that Windows does. So you will need to go and give it a valid IP address, and you may need to reboot if you opted to go in via safe mode to do that at the first instance. But other than that, you might want to go into Device Manager and check if there's any drivers that have been missing or anything like that. But other than that, you're all ready to go. And that's the real cool thing with ShadowProtect. So we can see here, here's my 200 gig hard drive now. I've got 193 gig free. And at this point in time, I can attach another hard drive to this virtual machine and restore the D drive if I wanted to. That basically brings me to the end of my demonstration. The key thing I've showed you today is I've done all of this without having to install anything. I've literally just plugged in this USB key, and I've been able to do a backup, and then again, if it was a hardware machine, I could just boot off that USB key to restore it, or the virtual machine, I have created that ISO file. So we'll just take a quick moment to talk about the recovery environment builder. So firstly, this can be downloaded from ftp.storagecraft.com.au through the recovery environment builders. This is this RE builder setup, 120 meg download. Once you install that, it will have to connect to Microsoft and download the Windows 8 ADK files. It is about 1.5 gig download. But once you've done that once, you've got your ISO file, you can do whatever you want with that. It's not something you have to always do. In this cross-platform folder, it's the Linux-based recovery environment. It's not the Windows-based one you just saw, so it's no way near as efficient for that hardware-independent restore process I just showed you and things like that. And you can't use it to create the ISO files that I just used or update your IT Edition key. So get the RE Builder on one of your workstations, and again, once you install it, it will guide you through connecting to the Windows ADK site and installing the assessment and deployment kit. So that's the default location it installs to. You select the output directory and you just simply select, I want to create a default recovery environment, so you don't need the IT Edition key for that. That just relies on your ShadowProtect serial key. You can create the IT Edition, which will allow me to update my IT Edition or create that ISO file I just used. Or you can create the 3-day ISO. Now this option, you've got to put in your IT Edition key and it has to be valid, and it will create an ISO file that will work for the next 3 days. You could burn that to a CD if you wanted to, and that 3-day one does not require the license server. So it's locked down to only work for 3 days, but it does make it a bit easier for you. Otherwise, if you just select the normal IT Edition, that will create the ISO file I just used. It's got that license, it looks for that license server built into it. Or you can use it to update your USB key to the latest version. That will output an ISO file to this directory. Once it has made that ISO file, it pops up with an option saying, hey, would you like to burn this to a CD, or would you like help to write it to a USB key? It takes you through those options if you need to do that. And also, before you create that ISO file, you can drag and drop in storage controller or network drivers if you know that you've got a particular machine that isn't supported by Windows 8 out of the box, or you're having problems, and that does make it a little bit easier for you. You don't have to worry about loading drivers in at another time. So that's the basics of the RE Builder, very straightforward, and we've got some good documentation if you want to ask the support guys for any of that. Hopefully that demonstration was helpful to everyone. The key thing is the zero footprint, the use of including that free space for forensics, and bare metal recovery with that hardware independent restore, all that stuff really cool out of the box with the IT Edition. So if you want to get a hands on one of those USB keys, get in touch with our sales team. Thanks for your time, guys.